Now, as we face a new year, it is a good time to reevaluate what has gone before and also what needs changing in this liminal space where we are being invited to discern God's forward movement in our lives and in our work. We may need to ask, where is the hand of God moving in our present time? Nasaan ang kamay ng Diyos sa mga panahong ito? Now, theologians speak of kairos moments, those times when the accent of eternity falls on our history, and when, as John the Baptist once put it, the axe is laid at the root of the tree. We sense that the times they are changing, as Bob Dylan once put it about the 60s generation. We experience a disruption of our way of life as a nation during this pandemic. And we sense that there is a coming social eruption and upheaval. Now, where is God? And what ought we to be doing as His people, as His church, in response to His call at this time? Now, let's go back and see what happened when God finally came to earth. Just like the Jews when the promised Messiah finally came to earth. We often miss seeing the hand of God at work in the ordinary events of our lives. Now, Luke locates the birth of Jesus round about the time when there was a census which was decreed by the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. This was probably about 5 AD, a year before the death of Herod the Great in 6 AD. Joseph had to go and register in his hometown in Bethlehem of Judea because he was of the house and lineage of David. The birth of Jesus was part of the warp and woof of human history. Ito lamang ang Diyos na sadyang bahagi ng ating kasaysayan. You can pin Him down on a calendar. Nandun po siya sa kalendaryo. But because there were no telltale signs that it was a royal birth, the Jews didn't think it was an event that was worth fussing about. In the first place, He was born in a manger, a feeding trough for animals. Scholars say that what is called an inn was in fact a lean-to that was attached to the entrance of caves in the hills of Bethlehem. It housed families and also was used as a shelter for guests. Livestock were kept further inside into the cave. And there was an overflow of guests at that time because many, like Joseph, had come to register in Judea, the land of their ancestry. Because there was no more room and perhaps wanting more privacy, Joseph had Mary give birth inside the cave with sheep and cows as witness to the child's birthing. The portentous meaning of the child's birth was lost on all but the simplest and the wisest. The shepherds, poor and despised, were the first to receive the angel's tidings of great joy. Jewish tradition held that the shepherds were so destitute as to be always at the point of stealing, and so were seen as untrustworthy. Yet it was to them that the heavenly host declared the birth of the Savior, and having witnessed what the angels told them, it is said that the shepherds made known the saying that had been told concerning this child. And it took foreigners, not Herod's court, nor the Jewish religious establishment, to discern the coming of the longed-for Messiah. The three magi from the east, wise men who divine planetary movements, saw his star from afar. These were Chaldean astrologers, who perhaps learned from Daniel and his friends who were taken captive in Babylon the prophecy about a Jewish king who will reign over all the earth. They trudged through the desert against sharp winds and sandstorm, following the star that led them to the Christ child. For centuries, the Jews had longed for the promised Son of David, who will restore the kingdom that had been overrun by various powers, from Assyria and Babylon to Greece and Rome. But by the time Jesus was born, there were only a few who were waiting for the consolation of Israel. One of these was Simeon, who was described as righteous and devout, and possibly, according to scholars, belonged to the liberal wing of the religious establishment at the time, the Sadducees. He must have suffered greatly as he watched the priests' betrayal of their sacred obligations and their willingness to collaborate with Rome. Prompted by the Spirit, he came into the temple just when the child's parents came for Mary's rite of purification. They also presented the child as was customary for the firstborn son. They offered the poor man's sacrifice of 2 young pigeons instead of a lamb a year old. Simeon saw the child, took him up in his arms, and praised God that he can now depart in peace. Because he says, "For my eyes have seen your salvation, that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel." His days of waiting as a watchman for the world's Savior is over. And with prophetic insight, he then told Mary, "Behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel. And a sword will pierce through your own heart also." There was also one other witness, the prophetess Anna, who briefly lived with her husband 7 years, and then as a widow until she was 84. She was always in the temple, fasting, praying, and worshiping day and night. And it is said that coming up at that very hour, she began to give thanks to God and to speak of this child to all who were waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem. It is significant that the coming of the Christ child was first revealed to those in the margins, the lowly shepherds, and the devout Jewish minority, who faithfully, like Simeon, kept watch, even as God seemed to be silent for 400 years. Now, what does this mean for us today? First, often we fail to see what God is doing in the world because our eyes are turned elsewhere on the doings of the powerful and the great. When the kingdom of God moves, it is often through the faithful obedience of small people like the teenage Mary, who risked gossip and censure by the village folk, or like the carpenter Joseph, who took on a pregnant woman as his betrothed and wife, and did his best to father a son whose conception he could not fathom. It looks like siguro for many, many years while Jesus was growing up, si Joseph was always in wonder as to what kind of child this was. It took ordinary but devout people like Simeon and Anna to recognize that the child was to be a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel. It was G.K. Chesterton, the British journalist, who said that genuine social change, like a revolution, really has no need of great men. A true revolution, he said, is a time when all people are great. We saw this during our own people power uprising in EDSA, when our people, rich or poor or middle class, came together to free ourselves from the authoritarianism of Ferdinand Marcos. Secondly, while it is true that salvation is from the Jews, the Messiah was for all peoples, as revealed to Simeon and the Magi. Now, the fact that the Magi, who were outsiders to the faith of Israel, were the ones in search of the one true King, tells us that people gain access to Jesus' kingdom, not because they are Jews, but because they have believed that Jesus is the one true hope for all the nations. That is why the Magi came to Herod's court, asking, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Herod and his minions had prophetic resources to know about the coming Christ, but instead saw the child not as promise, but as a threat. Herod was an Idumean who usurped the throne by kowtowing to the Romans and murdering all possible claimants, including his 3 sons and his favorite wife. Now, one of the saddest remarks about the Jews' non-recognition of the coming of the Savior was that of Apostle John. In John 1, he said, "He came to his own, and his own people receive him not." To this day, the Jews are still looking for their Messiah. They think that if just for one day all the Jews followed all the law, then Jesus will come, or at least the Messiah will come. Now, this wanting and looking for a Messiah is just like those of us who do not look at the carpenter's son as anything else but a savior. Instead, we pin our hopes on politicians who are spinning tales that they would save the nation. Finally, If we are to discern the hand of God in our present history, we need to sharpen our eyes on those people and things that are truly instruments of the kingdom. We are faced these days with critical choices. At this moment in our history, it is important that we discern who among those who wish to lead us shall truly serve this nation. It is in our nature to long for some bright star of a man or a woman who could lead us out of the morass of deprivation and degradation in which we have sunk. Unfortunately, we also tend to get beguiled by those who are able to spin false narratives. Gumagawa lang ng mga storya. Narratives that they are precisely the kind of men and women we are looking for. Madali tayong madala sa mga propaganda ng mga kandidatong merong pera. Meron silang pera para sa mga trolls sa social media so that they can spread fake news. As we approach the coming elections, let us have eyes for those candidates who have the moral compass, who have a vision, and who can stand for what is right under pressure. Mga kandidatong may prinsipyo, hindi bumibili ng boto, at hindi sinungaling, at hindi lang nangangako dahil alam naman natin ang pangako usually napapako. Tingnan natin yung kanilang mga track record. May mga kandidato na may nagawa na at hindi lang nangangako ng kanilang gagawin. Sila ba ay may nagawa na para sa taong bayan? Tanungin natin ito sa mga kandidato na naging governor, naging congressman, naging senator. Pero walang maipakita na nagawa na nila. So kailangan po suriin natin. Ano ba yung nagawa na nila? Ano yung track record nila? Ano na yung mga tinayuan nila na mga issues na para sa bayan? Napakahalaga po ito. Huwag tayong gumaya sa mga Hudyo na binigyan ng pagkakataon na sambahin ang matagal na nilang pinakahihintay na Mesiyas. Ngunit nang siya ay dumating, they had no eyes for him. So let us all pray that we shall have the gift of discernment to recognize what is already being given to us as a people. Otherwise, like the ancient Jews, we might miss our historical cues. Maaari tayong masadlak muli sa ating kalagayan ngayon at hindi na makabangon. So let us choose wisely and discern the people who will advance the cause of the kingdom in our nation.